The stars were silent. For almost a century, no one had spoken the name Virilia. It was a dead planet, a place erased from the Galactic Council's maps and minds. The war had taken many worlds, but Virilia was the one they all agreed to forget. Until now. A faint signal, weak and broken, pulsed through deep space. It traveled past dying suns and cold planets. It passed through ancient war zones and silent wreckage. Somewhere in a quiet data station on Earth, the signal was picked up by an old listening probe, a machine long thought useless. Its lights blinked for the first time in decades. Inside the Earth Space Fleet Command, the signal was flagged as historical debris. The automated system prepared to delete it, but someone stopped it. Lieutenant Leon Kovic, a junior officer with no power and too many questions, stared at the signal. His eyes narrowed. He enhanced the audio. A voice, broken and desperate, cracked through the noise. "This is Virilia, Colony 7. Survivors alive. Need help." The voice was human, and it was real. Virilia had been one of Earth's proudest colonies during the Great Galactic Expansion. A green world with 2 moons, rich in minerals, with air and water that needed little change. Over 300,000 humans had lived there. But during the Great Galactic War, the aliens known as the Tarvan Dominion had struck hard and fast. Virilia had no warships. The Galactic Council called it unsolvable. They told Earth to stand down and let it go. No rescue was sent. Everyone believed Virilia was wiped out. But someone had survived. Lion rushed to his commander, Captain Durrell. He showed him the signal and the audio. The older man stared for a moment, then sighed. "You've done your job, Lieutenant," the captain said. "Flag it, log it, and forget it." Leon frowned. "Sir, we can't ignore this. There are people out there, humans, survivors. They've been calling for help for nearly 100 years. The Council closed that chapter long ago," Durrell replied. Virilia was lost. Officially. "We don't open graves, Lieutenant." "It's not a grave if someone's still breathing in it," Lion said quietly. The captain didn't respond. The meeting was over. Back in his quarters, Lion couldn't sleep. He played the message over and over. Each time, he caught something new. A cough, a child crying in the background, static hiding words he couldn't make out. What kind of life had these people lived all these years? What had they built from nothing? Were they angry? Afraid? Still waiting? He did his own research. No records existed after the war. Satellite scans were blocked. The Council had locked all information under Security Class Red. It wasn't just forgotten. It was buried. A few days later, Lion took a risk. He contacted an old friend from the Academy, Narajex, a systems hacker working deep in Mars' tech sector. She was sharp, fearless, and bored with her job. "What do you need?" she asked. "I want to find out what's really on Virilia," Lion said. "I want the truth." Nara raised an eyebrow. "That's dangerous. The Council doesn't like people poking around old ghosts." "Then help me quietly." Within hours, Nara had broken into old logs. What she found chilled them both. There were survivors, Lion, hundreds, maybe thousands. The Council knew. There was even a plan to extract them, but it was canceled. On purpose. Why? No clue, but they sealed everything tight after that. Virilia was blacklisted. Lion's heart pounded. He stood up. "I'm going to find them." Nara laughed nervously. "You? Alone? That's suicide." "I won't be alone." The next week, in secret, Lion began building a crew. He spoke to people the Council didn't care about. Freighter pilots, retired soldiers, engineers too stubborn to quit. People who had lost something in the war. People who still believed in doing the right thing. He told them the truth. A colony was left to die, and no one cared. But he cared, and they could make history. They named the ship the Emberfall, a name that meant hope rising from ashes. Far away, Deep in council space, a cold pair of eyes watched Lion's activity. A hidden observer, non-human, reported to its masters. "The humans have found the signal," it whispered. "The silence may break." The Carvan Dominion, once responsible for the Virilian attack, stirred again. They had buried Virilia for a reason. If the colony still lived, it could expose everything. And so, the race began. Humanity had been quiet for too long. Now, they were listening. And soon, they would act. The hangar was cold and dark. Metal crates stacked like tombstones. Rusted old ships waited in silence. It wasn't the kind of place heroes came from. But it was perfect for what Lion Kovac needed. He stood with a datapad in hand, checking the final list. 14 people had agreed to join him. Some were misfits. Others had nothing left to lose. But all of them believed in the mission, saving the lost humans of Virilia. The council had ordered silence. Lion chose rebellion. Among the crew was Nara Jex, his hacker friend. She wore a dusty jacket full of tools, wires, and tricks. She smiled as she checked the ship's systems. "It's old, but it'll fly," she said. "Just don't expect it to land pretty." There was also Corvin Trask, a retired fleet marine. He had scars on his face and a quiet voice that made people listen. He had fought in the last battles of the Galactic War. The council had forgotten him too. "People left to die," he said, loading weapons into storage. "We've all been there. This time, we don't leave anyone behind." The ship was ready. The Emberfall rose from the hangar late at night, cloaked by a stolen stealth field. It drifted out of Earth's orbit and disappeared into the dark. No lights, no signal. No one knew it had gone. Except one. High above Earth, deep inside a council observation station, an agent watched a red blip vanish from the system. He tapped his comm and whispered, "They're moving. Target, Virilia." The message traveled across galaxies. It reached a shadow empire that had once brought fire to the stars, the Carvan Dominion. Their leaders watched silently. "Virilia must not rise again," one said. "Stop them before they reach the surface." Days passed aboard the Emberfall. The crew trained, checked systems, and ran silent. Space was endless, quiet, and black. But everyone felt the weight. They were not just flying to a planet. They were flying toward a forgotten truth. Lion stood at the bridge window, staring into the stars. "I wonder if they hate us," he said aloud. Nara looked up from her console. "The Virilians? Yeah, we left them. All of us. Earth, the Council, maybe even their families. They might hate us," Nara admitted, "but maybe they'll listen. If we're the first ones who come, not to control, not to judge, but to help." As the ship moved closer to Virilia's system, strange things began to happen. First, the scanners started showing ghost signals, ships that appeared for a second, then vanished. Next, navigation systems glitched. The crew grew tense. Corvin checked the weapons again. "This isn't just interference. We're being watched." Then it happened. A small ship appeared from behind a moon. Sleek, dark, alien. No markings. It fired a warning shot across the Emberfall's bow. The bridge shook. Lights flickered. "They're not trying to kill us," Nara said. "Just scare us." "It's working," muttered a young pilot. Lion stood firm. "Open a channel. Let's see who wants us dead." But no message came. The ship vanished before they could respond. Hours later, Lion gathered the crew. "We're not turning back," he said. "Whatever is out there doesn't want us to reach Virilia. That means they're hiding something, and we're going to find out what." No one argued. They reached the edge of Virilia's system just before dawn. The planet appeared slowly on the screen, a dusty, dark world with storms swirling above. There were no lights, no satellites, no signs of life. But then, something blinked on the map. A structure, big, alive, hidden deep in the mountains. "It's not a ruin," Nora whispered. Someone's still down there. Back in Council space, word of the mission finally reached the ears of Admiral Cern Halleck, a powerful figure who once led the campaign to abandon Virilia. He slammed his fist on the desk. They were supposed to die. He shouted, "We cannot allow this story to spread." He activated a secure channel to a hidden contact in the Tarvan Dominion. Destroy the Emberfall and erase the colony. Again. Leon didn't know it yet, but enemies were closing in from all sides. His crew had entered forbidden space. The Virilians were still alive. But they might not be happy to see Earth again. And the galaxy. The galaxy was about to remember what it chose to forget. The planet Virilia spun slowly beneath them. Wind storms whipped across its surface, carving deep lines into the mountains. But through the dust and silence, something stood tall. A fortress. Not ruins, not wreckage. A real, living structure. Huge walls made from ship metal, old satellite parts, and alien debris. A human symbol marked the gate. Worn, but still there. The survivors had not just lived. They had prepared for war. Leon Kovac stared at the screen on the Ember Falls Bridge. "This isn't a colony anymore," he said. "It's a stronghold." The crew watched in silence. There were signs of life. Power signatures, heat, movement, but no one answered their hails. "Why won't they respond?" Nora asked. Corvin narrowed his eyes. "They don't trust us. Would you?" Leon nodded. "They think we're like the Council, coming to finish what the aliens started. Then we'll prove them wrong," Corvin said, loading his weapon. "If they don't shoot us first." The Emberfall landed slowly outside the fortress walls. Dust filled the air. The engines screamed, then faded. The silence returned. No welcome team. No lights. Just cold wind. Lion, Corvin, Nara, and two others stepped out of the ship, hands raised. No weapons shown. The ground crunched under their boots. A camera hidden in a wall tracked their movement. A laser grid lit up for a second, then disappeared. "They're watching us," Nara whispered. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the wall. "Earth ships are not welcome. Leave now or be fired upon." Leon stepped forward. "We're not with the Council. We're not here to control you. We're here because we heard your call." Silence followed. Then the gate creaked open. Inside the fortress, everything was metal and fire. Old generators hummed. Men and women in patchwork armor stood with rifles built from old starship tech. Their faces were tired, hard, strong. A woman stepped forward, tall with a scar across her jaw. "I am Commander Rayavos, Virilian Defense Force." "Who are you?" Leon introduced himself and his crew. Rhea studied them carefully. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "We're just late," Lion replied. "Too late." Rhea didn't smile. The team was led into a large hall, once a cargo bay, now a meeting room. Maps, weapons, and data screens covered the walls. Rhea explained the truth. Only 30,000 people had survived the first attack. In the early years, there was hunger, disease, madness. People died every week. Then they began to fight back. They captured alien tech from old ships, rebuilt weapons, and trained children to defend the walls. Over decades, they created something new, not just survival, but power. "We were abandoned," Rhea said coldly. "But we didn't die. We became what you see." Lion told her about Earth, about the Council's lies, about how no one even knew they were alive. Rhea leaned back. "We sent signals for 20 years. Screams, really. Then we stopped. It was better to be alone than to hope." "But someone heard it," Nara said. "Us." Rhea's eyes softened, just a little. "You're not Council. That's clear. But that doesn't make you friends." She stood. "We'll let your crew stay. But one mistake, one threat. We'll bury your ship in this dust." Meanwhile, above Virilia's orbit, the air shimmered. A Xarvan scout ship uncloaked for just 1 second. Enough to scan the area and confirm it. The humans made contact. The colony is alive. The message was sent, and the kill order returned. Destroy the fortress. Leave no record. The hunter ships were on their way. Back in the fortress, Lion walked through the lower levels, guided by a young Virilian named Aaron, only 17, but already a soldier. Aaron showed him the nursery, the schools, the food farms built underground. "We don't live easy," he said, "but we live free." Leon watched the kids play with broken tech parts and laughed for the first time in days. "You've done the impossible," he said. Aaron shrugged. "We did what we had to. When no one comes, you build your own rescue." That night, alarms sounded. Rhea ran to the control center. "They found us," she said. "Who?" Lion asked. She pointed to the sky screen. "Red dots, fast, coming close. Sarvan hunter ships, 3 of them." Corvin stepped forward. "They're not scouts. They're cleaners." Rhea gave the order. "Ready the guns. Lock the gates. Virilia doesn't fall today." As the Emberfall crew rushed to help prepare defenses, Lion realized something. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. This was war. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming next. The sky over Virilia turned red. Zarvan hunter ships dropped through the atmosphere like burning knives. Their engines howled like monsters. Inside the fortress, alarms screamed, and soldiers rushed to the walls. Commander Rhea Voss stood at the front line. "All units in position," she ordered. "This is not a drill. They're coming to finish us." Lion stood beside her, armor barely on, his heart racing. "This is it," he said, "the moment the galaxy learns we're not gone." Rhea didn't look at him. "No, this is the moment we make sure they remember who we are." The first blast hit the outer wall. Metal bent. Smoke filled the air. One turret exploded into pieces. But the Virilians didn't run. They fired back with ancient cannons and rebuilt alien tech. The air lit up with red and blue bolts. The ground shook as the battle began. Corvin took command of a defense team near the south gate. He barked orders like he was back in the war. 2 young Virilians followed his lead without question. "They're testing our weak points," he said. "Don't give them one." Inside the Emberfall, Nera hacked into the defense grid. "These old systems are tough," she muttered, sparks flying from her panel. "But I can get the satellite weapons online." Aaron, the young soldier, helped her reroute power from backup generators. "You really think we can stop them?" he asked. Nera looked at him and smiled. "I think they're about to regret coming here." Outside, a Xarvan ship dropped low, firing straight at the command tower. Rhea raised her rifle, aimed carefully, and fired a pulse round directly into the ship's vent port. The ship spun, caught fire, and crashed into the ground. The Virilians cheered, just for a moment. Then the second wave came. Lion ran to the west wall as explosions rocked the fortress. He saw something that made his blood run cold. One of the Xarvan ships wasn't shooting. It was scanning. "They're mapping the entire base," he shouted into the comm. "They're planning to wipe it from orbit." Rhea cursed. "We don't have the weapons to stop an orbital strike." Leon paused. "But we have something better." He rushed back to the Emberfall. Inside, he opened a hidden console in the ship's core. He had one secret he hadn't told anyone. Something his father left behind. A prototype distress burst. It wasn't a normal signal. It could punch through jammers, stealth fields, and even council firewalls. It would send one loud message to every human system in the galaxy. Lion stared at the activation key. "If I do this, they'll all know," he whispered. Then he pressed the button. In seconds, the message was launched. It screamed across space, through satellites, broken probes, and old relays. It reached colonies, stations, even Earth itself. The message was simple. Virilia lives. Under attack. Humanity abandoned them. but they survived. And now, they fight. Across the galaxy, people stopped and listened. On Earth, news channels flashed red. Council leaders stared in shock. Civilians gasped. A planet forgotten had spoken. Back on Virilia, the fortress was cracking. The third Sarvan ship landed outside the gates. Dozens of armored troops marched forward. Their weapons glowed green. "We're out of time," Rhea said. "We fall back to the core." "No," Lion said. He walked to the outer gate and stared at the approaching troops. He raised a stolen Sarvan flare gun and fired it into the sky. The alien troops froze. He spoke through the fortress speakers. "You'd thought this world was dead. You thought you could erase them, but now the galaxy is watching. This isn't a colony anymore. This is a warning. We are still here." Suddenly, the Virilian sky lit up. New signals entered orbit. Unknown ships, human designs. Emergency response fleets. Civilians flying cargo freighters, weaponized transports, even mercenaries. All drawn by the signal. The galaxy hadn't forgotten. It had just been silent. Until now. That Exarvan commanders saw the readings. Too many. Too fast. They gave the retreat order. One by one, their ships lifted and vanished into the clouds. The battlefield grew quiet. The people of Virilia, bloody, tired, and still standing, let out one long breath. Rhea looked at Lion. "You broke the silence." "No," he said, watching the sky fill with ships. They did. The galactic silence had shattered. Across the stars, messages poured in. Across Earth, news broadcasts flashed red with the words, "Virilia lives." The Council of Earth, high in its ivory towers, sat in stunned silence. No one spoke. They all stared at the data coming in. Ships, soldiers, and civilians, all moving toward Virilia. Leon Kovic's message had done what they thought impossible. It had called the galaxy's attention to a forgotten world. A world the Council had abandoned. Admiral Cern Hellick slammed his fist on the table. "This was supposed to be contained," he shouted. "How could this happen?" A nervous counselor stammered. We didn't think it would get this far." The signal. Halleck's voice cracked. "You let a signal reach the entire galaxy. You're all fools." Meanwhile, on Virilia, Rhea stood outside the fortress gates, watching the new ships descend. More human ships, dozens of them. The first ones to arrive were merchant ships, older models, patched up and ready for a fight. Then came warships, small, but armed to the teeth, and scattered in between, civilian ships, freight haulers, and escape pods. These were the people the Council had abandoned, the ones who had remembered Virilia. Lion watched it all, standing beside Rhea. "They came," he said quietly, "not to fight, but to help." Rhea didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "They may help us today, but what happens when the Council comes for them?" Lion clenched his fists. "We fight." On Earth, the Council was in chaos. Counselor Eric Drell stood before the massive screen, his face pale. "It's too late to stop them," he said. "The galaxy is already awake. The galaxy is already against us." Hellick snapped. "Virilia is just the beginning. If the message gets out further." "I know," Drell interrupted, "which is why we need to contain this now." "We can't just contain it," Halleck growled. "We need to end it. Permanently." Drell shook his head. The plan was to let them die in silence. Now that silence is gone, we can't erase the truth. The people will turn on us. Above Virilia, a new fleet entered the system. Human ships with civilian markings, fighters and freighters, led by an old battleship called the Vanguard. It was commanded by Captain Dararoshan, a leader from one of the first lost colonies. The people of Virilia had watched the Council's abandonment for years, but they weren't the only ones. "We're not just helping them," Captain Roshan said to her crew, her voice steady. "We're sending a message. The galaxy cannot forget what happened to Virilia. Not again." Back in the fortress, Lion and Rhea stood by a makeshift command center. New faces, civilians and soldiers alike, were ready to fight. A new world was being built in front of them, one that had suffered, fought, and now demanded to be heard. The air was thick with the sound of engines, people shouting orders, and the hum of old weapons being tested. Nara stood beside Lion, eyes glued to a screen. "They're not giving up," she said. "The Council's going to send ships to burn this place to the ground." "We're ready for them," Lion replied. "Maybe," Nara said, "but you have no idea what's coming. They don't just send fleets. They send fire." High above the system, a massive Council battle cruiser appeared, the Resolute. It was the largest ship in the Council's fleet, its massive cannons powered and ready. Admiral Halleck's voice crackled over the comm. "This ends now. Surrender Virilia to the Council, or face destruction." Lion looked at the old star maps. His mind raced, but his resolve was strong. "No surrender," he said. "Not this time." He turned to Rhea. "We'll hold them off, long enough for the rest of the galaxy to see what the Council really is." Rhea nodded. "Then let's show them what happens when you push too far." The battle began. The sky above Virilia was filled with the sound of war, ships firing, explosions lighting up the dark. The Emberfold joined the fray, firing at the incoming Council ships. Weapons, old and new, lit the night. The first few shots hit the Council cruiser, but the Resolute was built for war. It fired back with devastating force. "We need to do more than just fight," Lion shouted, scanning the battle. Nara hacked into the ship's systems, eyes flashing with intensity. "There's a weak spot in the cruiser's armor. If we can take it down, the rest of the fleet will scatter." "You have one shot," Lion said. She didn't hesitate. The Virilian fleet, once hidden away, now fired with a power they hadn't had before. Ships that had survived through hard work and ingenuity fought side by side with Earth's forgotten people. Every shot, every maneuver was a testament to their resilience. Back on Earth, the message spread. The Council couldn't silence it anymore. Virilia had become more than a forgotten world. It had become a symbol of what the galaxy could be, a place where humanity fought for its own, no matter the cost. As the battle raged, Lion's voice crackled over the comms. "This isn't just about us. This is about everyone who's ever been left behind." And then, with a final blast, the Resolute's weak spot was hit. The ship shuddered and began to break apart, its crew scattering in defeat. The galaxy was watching, and the Council had lost. The skies of Virilia burned with fire. The battle had raged for hours, but now there was silence. The last of the Council's ships had been pushed back. Their once mighty fleet now drifted, broken, scattered, and retreating. The Virilian and human ships hovered, their weapons still trained on the wreckage, ready for any final attack that might come. But it didn't come. The Council had lost. On the surface of Virilia, the people stood in the shadow of their rebuilt fortress. Rhea Voss surveyed the horizon, her face hard but hopeful. Lion Kovic stood beside her, sweat dripping from his brow, his eyes scanning the sky for any sign of new threats. "Is it over?" Nara asked, her voice cracking through the comm. She was with Lion, as always, checking the scanners. No more ships. Lion looked up at the sky. The only ships visible now were human. Familiar faces from old colonies, warships, freighters, and the civilians who had answered the call. They were free. "For now," he said, "but there's something bigger coming." Back on Earth, Council leaders watched the events unfold through the massive screens in their war rooms. The defeat had been swift, but it was more than just a loss of ships. It was the collapse of their control over the galaxy. Admiral Halleck stood at the head of the table, his hands shaking with rage. "We were humiliated," he spat. We were outnumbered by people who had nothing but scraps and fire in their hands. Councillor Drell, pale and exhausted, looked out the window at the city below. This isn't just about the defeat, it's about the truth. Virelia, they're not alone anymore. There are more colonies, Halleck growled. More survivors. They all heard the signal. Drell turned slowly. And now they all know what we did. On Virelia, Lion and Rio watched as the last of the council ships left the system. A new silence filled the air. This was the calm after the storm, the moment when they could finally breathe. Lion exhaled deeply. We won, against all odds. Rhea didn't smile. She only nodded, eyes still sharp, watching the sky. But this battle is over. The real war starts now. In the fortress, the people of Virelia gathered, their voices ringing in the night air. There was no longer the fear of imminent destruction. Instead, they felt something else, a quiet sense of purpose. The refugees, the soldiers, the civilians, they were all rebuilding. The battle had been hard, but it had shown them that they were no longer forgotten. They were something more. Rhea stood before them. For decades, we've been silent, she began. We've been alone, forgotten by the galaxy. But we're no longer alone. We're no longer silenced. Today, we stand united. She raised her hand. Today, we fight not just for survival, but for the future of everyone who's ever been left behind. The crowd erupted in cheers. Lion stood beside Rhea, watching the people of Virelia. But his mind was elsewhere. The battle with the Council was a victory, but there was still more to come. He knew the galaxy wouldn't simply forget what had happened. And there were forces out there, old and new, who would want to challenge the new order that was being born. Nera joined him, looking out at the stars. We've made our mark, Lion. The galaxy will know us now. The Council can't hide their mistakes anymore. Leon nodded. But this is just the beginning. The new human fleet, led by Captain Dararoshan, had already begun planning their next steps. Virelia had become a symbol, a beacon to every survivor who had been forgotten. They were no longer just a collection of broken colonies. They were a movement that had one clear message: no more silence. Meanwhile, far beyond the edges of Virelia's system, another fleet watched from the shadows. Dark ships, cloaked in the black of space, moved through the empty void. They weren't human, and they weren't allies. That Hexarvan had been defeated for now, but they were not gone. Their forces were in disarray, but they were gathering. Their leaders were still angry. Their hatred for humanity had not ended. The fight was far from over. Back on Virelia, Lion stood with Rhea as the sun began to rise on the horizon. What happens now? He asked. Rhea turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. Now, we rebuild. We stand together, stronger than ever. Lion looked up at the sky, his mind racing. We'll need everyone, he said, not just humans. Every race, every colony. Anyone who's ever been left behind. If we're going to keep this world alive, we'll need a united galaxy. Rhea nodded. Then we'll make them listen. The galaxy won't ignore us anymore. And as the sun rose over the newly united world of Virelia, the message was clear. They had survived. They had fought. And now, they would lead the galaxy into a new dawn. But the future was uncertain. Dark forces still lingered. And the battle for humanity's place in the stars had only just begun. The galaxy was awakening. News of Virelia's victory had spread like wildfire, igniting hope in the hearts of millions. Forgotten colonies, long abandoned by the Galactic Council, now saw the light of rebellion. Ships from every corner of the galaxy, human and alien, began to assemble. The forgotten had found each other, united by the message that had broken the silence. But in the shadows, enemies still watched. The Xarvan fleet had regrouped, and a new threat was emerging, one more dangerous than ever before. The Council, despite its defeat, was plotting its next move. The galaxy was on the verge of a new war. Virelia stood as a beacon of hope, but also a target. The newly formed alliance between human and alien colonies was fragile. Lion Kovac and Rhea Voss, leaders of this new resistance, knew that the Council wouldn't stop. They would fight to retain their control. And the Xarvan, they were a threat too vast to ignore. Rhea walked the outer perimeter of the fortress, her boots crunching the sand beneath her feet. The horizon was dark, and the stars burned cold in the sky. She knew what was coming. Lian found her, joining her on the battlements. He didn't need to say anything. He could feel the weight of it too, the tension in the air. "They're coming," she said quietly. "I know," Lian replied, eyes narrowing as he stared into the distance. "We've had time to prepare, but not enough. It's not just that Xarvan anymore." Rhea looked at him, determination in her eyes. "We stand together. We fight together. That's how we survive." Inside the command center, Nara and Captain Dira Roshan were hard at work. The new fleet, built from human survivors and alien allies, was forming. Ships that had been abandoned, forgotten in the past, now came together, ready to face their greatest challenge yet. "I've been looking over their fleet," Nara said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "The Xarvan have the advantage in numbers and firepower, but we have the element of surprise. They'll underestimate us. But we can't underestimate them," Captain Roshan warned, her eyes scanning the tactical map. "If we're going to win this, we need a plan that hits them where it hurts." Lian entered the command center, his face grim. "We don't have time for a drawn-out war. We hit them hard. We break their chains, and we send a message." Rhea followed him inside. "Lian's right. We have the strength of unity. That's our advantage. We fight as one, humans and aliens together." The room fell silent as they all took in the weight of their words. They were about to make history, or they were about to die trying. The Xarvan fleet arrived in full force. Massive warships, cloaked in shadows, emerged from the darkness of space. They were a sight of terror, larger, stronger, and more advanced than anything Virelia had ever seen. Their ships were equipped with weapons capable of turning entire planets into dust. And yet, in the face of certain annihilation, humanity and its allies stood tall. Lian's voice crackled over the comms, strong and steady. "This is the final stand. No more running. No more hiding. Today, we fight for every colony, for every person who has been forgotten, for every human and alien who's ever been left to die. Today, we fight for the galaxy." The fleet responded with a roar, ships aligning for the coming battle. Rhea stood at the forefront, the wind pulling at her hair. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "We've been pushed to the brink, but we're still here. We're still standing, and we're going to make sure the galaxy remembers why." The battle began. It was chaos. Xarvan ships opened fire, sending blasts of deadly energy toward the fleet. The sound of explosions shook the space around them as human and alien ships returned fire. The battlefield was a storm of lights, weapons, and the deafening roar of combat. Lian's ship, the Emberfall, darted through the chaos, its crew focused and ready. They had trained for this moment. They had prepared for the day they would face down the monsters that had once destroyed their world. "Keep moving," Lian shouted into the comms. "We need to hit their command ship." Nara's voice echoed through the ship. "I've located the weak spot, right at the core of their flagship. If we hit it, they'll crumble." Lian's eyes narrowed. This was the moment they had been waiting for. He gave the order. "Prepare the main weapon. Full power." The Emberfall roared as its cannons charged. They lined up the shot. Time seemed to slow. The Xarvan flagship, the Tyrant, was massive, an iron giant with shields that could repel almost any attack. But it wasn't invincible. The shot from the Emberfall hit dead center. The explosion was deafening. The Tyrant shook, then split in two, its core breached, power systems failing. The Xarvan fleet faltered, their ships losing coordination, the command ship falling into chaos. For a brief moment, the galaxy held its breath. The battle raged on, but without their flagship, the Xarvan were in disarray. Human and alien ships pressed the advantage, breaking through the enemy lines, forcing the Xarvan to retreat. But the victory was bittersweet. Virilia had won, but the scars of the battle would remain. The galaxy had changed forever. As the dust settled, Lion stood on the command deck of the Emberfall, staring out at the wreckage of the Xarvan fleet. Rhea joined him, both of them silent for a long moment. "We did it," Rhea said quietly, "against all odds." Leon nodded, but his eyes were hard. "The war is over, but the real work begins now. We've made our stand. Now we rebuild." "We rebuild together," Rhea said, "as one." The new dawn was breaking over Virilia. The stars, once distant and cold, now seemed full of promise. Humanity, along with its allies, had proved that no matter how many times they were pushed down, they would rise again. And this time, they would never be forgotten. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a new era, a new beginning, and no one would ever silence them again. The end.